Hello, everybody. Welcome to the launch of Grandmothers for Gun Responsibility. I am Margaret Heldring, and I am serving as the Chief Executive Officer of this new organization. And I am delighted, have to say this, to throw out the first pitch for the organization. We have a program planned for us today, brief, focused, but compelling. And let me just begin by saying how uplifting it has been to see the names and locations of so many of our participants all over the country. And I especially notice Mimi from Georgia, who was a first responder at Columbine. We've been addressing the problem of gun violence for a long time now, and we've lost many lives. Many families and communities have been disrupted, even devastated. But we grandmothers are here to join the movement to make change. So, why grandmothers? Well, one reason I'd like to share with you is that according to the United States Census of 2020, which is a while ago now, there are about 59, 60 million people in this country over the age of 65. That's a lot of voices. That's a lot of potential power. We can organize it, mobilize it, harness it, direct it. Actually, we are in a period right now that's called Peak 65, which means in the next few years, 11,000 people a day in this country will turn 65. That's about 4 million people a year. Our age group is is on a growth pattern, which is wonderful. And we are here to help us make a difference. So who are grandmothers? Who is this group, Grandmothers for Gun Responsibility? We are a new national organization. We will be elevating, as I've just said, the voices of grandmothers, grandfathers, and all concerned with gun violence, elevating them into the very robust gun violence prevention community. We will be and are dedicated, it is our mission, we are dedicated to a future without gun violence. We are inspired by the urgency of this problem. We want to, in particular, and intend to, and will, and I will share how toward the end of the program, step up to, in particular, protect children and teens and communities all across the nation in this national family of ours. The rich roots behind our work. One is the rich history of women as activists promoting positive social change. A second is the rich tradition of grandparents, particularly grandmothers, stepping in and stepping up to care for children, to raise children, to nourish children, often under very challenging conditions. There is the rich tradition ongoing of several state-based organizations working on gun violence prevention that have been models and leaders in this country for how to make change happen. Of course, the one nearest and dearest to my heart is in Washington State, Grandmothers for Against Gun Violence. But I also want to call out Grandmothers Against Gun Violence on Cape Cod and Grandparents for Gun Safety in Kansas, Missouri. These were the first seeds planted about the potential role of grandparents. I want you to know we are a board of directors of 7 distinguished women and men coming from 5 different states. We are an advisory council of about 11 and a staff of 4. Together, we represent 2 nations and 4 additional states. But really what we are and what we will increasingly be is you, people across the country, urban, rural, east, west, south, people who are seasoned advocates, people who are new to advocacy. You have witnessed Columbine, Sandy Hook, Uvalde, Parkland, Highland Park, Las Vegas, Southern California University, Mother Emanuel Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. You have witnessed those large events, but you also, many of you, have been exposed to and affected by the smaller events that take place every day, the suicide, the domestic violence, the interpersonal violence that happens. So there really is not one of us who is apart from this problem we share as a nation. We are going to hear from our incredibly distinguished speakers in just a moment. But as we move into that, I want to say the chat will be closed, but the Q&A will be open. We would love your questions, love for you to put your questions in there. We will not respond to them today. We're not going to have time, but we will respond to every one of them within the next week. I want to really extend my heartfelt thanks to those of you who are here today, to many of you. You have been the early believers. You have created the foundation for this organization. You have given your time, your talent, your treasure to helping us get going. And I think you can see today we are now underway. So let me introduce our speakers, and I'm going to introduce all of them, and then we will begin hearing from them. So my first great pleasure is to introduce Bill Bradley. I think most of you know Bill is a former U.S. Senator from New Jersey. He is also an author, a playwright, an actor in that play, an athlete, and someone who has spent most of his life working toward extending and sharing any national prosperity and well-being we have to all people. So Bill, thank you for being here. We also are delighted to welcome Ilana Landsberg Lewis. Ilana is a member of our advisory council. She hails from Canada, but is now in New York. And Ilana is not only the national, she is the global leader and source of inspiration on the role of grandmothers in different cultures and societies. And she founded Grandmothers to Grandmother, and now she has a podcast called Grandmothers on the Move. We also hopefully will have with us, he might be a bit delayed, Brian. And Brian Williams, he is a trauma surgeon at Parkland Memorial Hospital in Texas. Brian is a graduate of the Air Force Academy. He served as a Robert Wood Johnson Health Policy Fellow on Capitol Hill, working for Senator Chris Murphy, and he is the author of a book called The Bodies Keep Coming. And we are very happy to introduce also LaShonda Pittman. LaShonda is an associate professor at the University of Washington, and her book has the wonderful title called Grandmothering While Black. And finally, but certainly not least, our board chair, Linda DeGutis. Linda is a former director of the Center for Injury Prevention at CDC, a past president of the American Public Health Association, and a professor at Yale. Linda has dedicated decades to understanding violence and prevention in this country and how to prevent it. Many of you who are on our call right now are members of our advisory council. You are activists from all over the country. You really represent a portrait of our generation. You have witnessed these events. You've been teachers, nurses, community leaders, artists, activists, homemakers, change makers. You are wonderful to be here and to be a part of this, and we look forward to working together over the next years. So let me welcome Bill and turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Margie, for the introduction and the invitation to be a part of this terrific organization. I think that if we think about our national moment right now, we are a mixture of angry and confused and wondering what we can do, what any one person can do. The things that are happening are so large and have such dramatic impact on our lives. And yet, I look at grandmothers for gun responsibility and think, maybe kind of ironically, in this kind of difficult national moment, the possibility of doing something with grandmothers even becomes greater and more important. I've known Margie Heldring for over 25 years, and I've seen her in action and on my Senate staff. And I know that when she wants to get things done, they usually happen. So the organization's lucky to have Margie as a leader. And I think that always there are values that I have always felt were important to emphasize. And those values are emphasized by grandmothers for gun responsibility. Things like civility, decency, a sense of community. These days, those things seem to be devalued. I hope we're going to be able to show that they are empowered and that real change can happen in a difficult area that's never had real change happen before, and that we can do that because we're committed to each other and to those deeper values. So I'm very honored and pleased to be a part of this effort, and I'd like to pass the baton to Ilana Landsberg Lewis.
Thanks so much, Bill, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a delight and an honor to be here with you today on a momentous occasion like this one. It's always powerful when grandmothers and older women come forward to lend their wisdom, their moxie, their thoughtfulness and action to urgent causes that affect us all, and this is just such a moment. And I've had the great privilege to work alongside grandmothers and grandothers who have been moving mountains globally, changing attitudes, raising awareness, mobilizing resources, sharing critical knowledge, and keeping their communities and societies grounded and surviving and connected. And I'm here today, I'm honored to be a part, as Margaret said, of the Advisory Council and to share some of the learning I've been so fortunate to have in the company of grandmother advocates and what's possible when we unleash the energy and momentum of grandmother organizing and mobilizing. In Canada, for instance, where I'm from, we launched a Solidarity Not Charity campaign to connect Canadian grandmothers to the indefatigable grandmothers in sub-Saharan Africa, raising millions of children orphaned by AIDS and stepping into the breach to support their families and communities after losing a generation of their adult children to AIDS. 10,000 grandmothers across Canada, many of whom had never been activists, rallied to the call to support their African counterparts, when donors said to me that they weren't interested in supporting the grandmothers from South Africa to Zimbabwe to Kenya and beyond because they weren't a sustainable investment. Well, the grandmothers proved them wrong and then some. The Canadian grandmothers have raised awareness about the central role of the African grandmothers on the front lines of the pandemic, at the heart of the response, and have raised over $40 million and profound respect for the African grandmothers and their critical work. Across the globe, there are grandmothers, particularly Indigenous elder women, like the Council of 13 Indigenous Grandmothers and the Society of Fearless Grandmothers right here in the US, who have banded and bonded together to fight to safeguard the earth. Water protectors, forest protectors, climate justice guardians, who are making a palpable difference and working across generations to bring sanity and succor to our gasping planet. And at the Commission on the Status of Women that is convening right now at the United Nations, there are countless older women and grandmothers who were at the World Conference on Women in Beijing in 1995, who carry the courage and the wisdom, the know-how to get even reluctant governments to sign on to critical declarations of women's rights. And they are working alongside young feminist activists to share the knowledge and ensure that women from the global majority in the South are heard and heeded in the corridors of power where decisions are being made. And now we have the, Grandmothers for Gun Responsibility. Again, using the moniker of grandmother, infusing that mantle with all the power and love and determination to improve the human condition and to be the vanguards and visionaries who will find a way to bring us together around the most intractable of issues to ensure the safety, responsibility for, and the very survival of generations to come. Look, in such turbulent and precarious times, the world over, we desperately need our elder women, our grandmothers, our keepers of stories and knowledge and know-how in all their diversity to guide us, to join, to lead, and push us into mutuality, community, into sanity, safety, and generosity of spirit, with the skills to model an openness for dialogue and lifelong learning, how to listen to one another, how to create space for different lived realities, how to engender conversations that are not ruinous, but transformative. I mean, who doesn't recognize that we better not cross our grandmothers? I mean, we look to them, to you, for the well-being, for community building, for grit, for courage and equilibrium that we all so desperately seek and deserve. This is the dawn of a movement that we all need and can be part of with love and resolve from grandmothers who are not just keepers of the stories of our past, but guardians of our future. So onward and thank you. And now I will turn it over to the wonderful LaShonda Pittman.
Thank you so much, Alana. I always love hearing from you. Super excited to be here. This is such a monumental event and occasion. So thanks to everyone who's worked so hard to make this happen. I'll speak from the place of grandparents raising grandchildren. There has been a significant increase since 1970 in the number of children that are living in grandparent-headed households. We're currently at about 9% of children, and of that 9% of children living in grandparent-headed households, the vast majority live in three-generation households, but you've got about a third of them almost that live in what we call skip generation households or grandfamilies, and that is a household where there's only the grandparent and grandchild present. And I'll say that that sort of like 9% increase, which was 3.2% back in 1970. So you can see how monumental the shift is for the number of children that are being raised or grandparents who are helping raise their grandchildren. In no way reflects the fact that at some point in a child's life in the United States, 30% of kids will live with their grandparents at some point. Again, significant number of children who will be living in the homes with their grandparents. Again, the majority of these, 24.6%, live in these three-generation households, but 5% lives in skip generation households. In these households, particularly skip generation households, which are the ones that I study, the families I study, African Americans and American Indians are significantly overrepresented for all kinds of reasons, which I'll get into in a second. But also, we're beginning to see a rise in these households from other racial ethnic groups like Latinx community, as well as white families. Why are these households so important? Well, they're important, one, because grandparents, as many of us who are here know, are the primary safety net for children when they're not in the care of their parents. And within that sort of grandparent realm, it's mostly grandmothers who are doing the bulk of that caregiving and that work. These families are incredibly economically vulnerable. They're, in fact, the most economically vulnerable families in our country. And grandmother-headed households alone, this is meaning not married, without a partner, are 3 times more likely to live at the federal poverty level than both households that have both grandparents, and 7 times more likely to live at the federal poverty level compared to those that are headed by grandfathers. So you can see sort of the ways in which gender compounds that vulnerability, both economically, health-wise, and social, and so on. My book, Grandmothering While Black, a 21st Century Story of Love, Coercion, and Survival, centers the experiences of the group most overrepresented among skip generation households in the United States, and that's Black grandmothers. Black grandmothers have the distinction of being more likely than all other grandparents to be raising a child alone without a partner or a parent in the household. So why are so many grandparents raising grandchildren now compared to 1970? Most of us here have some sense of why that is. And my students ask me all the time, how'd you get into studying grandmothers? And I always say that there's not any sort of social problem that happens on the planet that doesn't lead to the kinds of families that I study, whether that's climate crisis and the migration that happens in response, wars, famine, and world hunger. Particularly, we see it so much. Africa has probably the most world hunger issues in the the world. China, in fact, has the largest growth in grandparents raising grandchildren because of sort of the rural to urban migration. And then those sort of like demographic trends that we're seeing all over the world with more single parenthood, less marriage, rising divorce, more people living longer, and so on. And to get to sort of another topic that really impacts the families that I study, gun violence. Whether those guns are being used in domestic violence, gang violence, drug wars, suicide, police violence and brutality in communities of color, but gun violence. Gun violence is significantly contributing to why we're seeing so many grandparents raising grandchildren. Grandmothers for Gun Responsibility is important, not only because it shines a light on grandmothers as victims of gun violence, survivors of gun violence, but also advocates of gun violence, as in the work of Ilana Landsberg Lewis, who just spoke. I look forward to partnering more with Grandmothers for Gun Responsibility as we work more with our existing local kinship support groups, where we find many relatives raising children in response to gun violence, our regional gun violence participation groups, and initiatives on my campus here at UW that examine the impacts of gun violence not only as a social problem, but as a public health issue. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Brian Williams, who may be present, and if not, then Linda DeGutis.
Thank you, LaShonda. And Brian has still not been able to make it. He's still tied up with an emergency, so I will talk first, and then we'll see if he joins us before I turn it back over to Margie. So I wanted to talk about why I'm involved in this and what sorts of things I think we really can do and how we can make a difference. So I've seen gun violence affect people all over and their families and communities, and I've sat with grandmothers and grandothers, as Alana said, and I like that term um, because I've seen them when a grandchild of theirs has been killed or injured by gun violence, and I've sat there and they they start to grieve, but generally initially they're so shocked and have such a difficult time coming to terms with what's happened and how they've lost the person that they knew before. So seeing that and seeing all kinds of deaths, injuries, long-term impacts or effects of gun violence made me want to go upstream and look at how can we prevent it and how can we do more to prevent it. So I've done a lot of work in public health, and as Margie mentioned, I was at the CDC. I was there at the time of the Sandy Hook shootings, also at the time that Gabby Giffords was shot when she was campaigning. We all thought there might be some movement at those times that we might be able to do more. We might be able to have more resources really dedicated to doing something to prevent gun violence, but it didn't happen. But what I do know is that grandmothers and their grandchildren, the grandothers, can all add their voices and tell their stories in ways that we can't tell the stories. That someone who has experienced this in their life can tell the stories much differently and can help us to put a face on the numbers that we talk about and the numbers that we present to people. And I know that we can work together with people who have had this experience to help them come forward and tell their stories. So I think that we all have a role to play, whether it's helping somebody to tell their story, whether it's telling a story that we have, whether it's asking a question about what do you see as the problem in your community and what can we do to help you address it? What can we learn? What do we need to know about what works and what doesn't work? How can we really advocate for things that will work and that are based on the evidence that something can make a difference? So I know that we can do something about this, that we can do something about the forms of gun violence that we see, And I know that given that there are guns in in our environment, we can look at how can we keep people safe, much as we've done with things like cars and other things that are part of our daily lives. So I'm going to turn it over to Margie if Brian is not here, and we'll see if Brian has made it back. I don't think he's joined though.
Thank you, Linda. Yes, well, if Brian does show up, I am happy to pop off and welcome him because he is a gem. So are you all. Thank you very much for your comments. Bill, you gave us a national context and underscored the promise of grandmothers to address not only this problem, but to represent something positive and good at this time. Thank you, Ilana. You gave us a global context and, as usual, found really strong, beautiful words to capture the grandmotherness and what that means in different societies. I really love your phrase, push into mutuality. So thank you very much. LaShonda, you've done such great work helping not only a lot of people, but what actually all of us understand the increasing role of grandparents, especially grandmothers, in the home and raising children against a lot of challenges or in the middle of a lot of challenges. What fortitude, what absolute fortitude. It just moves me. And Linda, thank you. You understand this problem so deeply and thoroughly, and it is your leadership that is helping us find our way forward. So how are we going to go forward? I'm going to share a couple thoughts that are on the table, and I want to really stress how much we want to hear from you, not only about what you see you would like to see grandmothers do, but also you are the experts in your local areas. You know your state, you know your town, you know your county, you know your neighbors, and what you can bring to grandmothers from those sources will help us shape our actions and help us develop our strategies. We, as somebody said, I think Linda said, we want to be on call for you. If you've got something going on near you in your state, you're pushing an initiative, you're holding meetings, maybe a town hall or something like that, we are happy to go find grandparents in your area, which we've started to do in a couple states, and show up to be there for you to strengthen your presence. But we are going to do a couple things, and I want to share 3 or 4 of them. One is there is a bill now in the Congress and the House that has to do with concealed carry. And it is a bill that basically would allow reciprocity across all states. So anybody could carry a gun in a concealed manner anywhere in this country. This belongs in the category of not good. And grandmothers will be working on and deciding, our board will guide us on how to respond to this. But we want to be a voice opposing things that are dangerous, and we want to be a voice in support of things that are good. And here's what's good. In quite a few states right now, including Washington State, we have a couple great bills going on, but also in the Congress, just reintroduced was Ethan's Law, which is a bill that promotes safe and secure storage of guns in the home. And you might want to go read about Ethan's song and the song his parents, Kristen and Mike, who have been leading this effort. It is the most fundamental thing that this nation can do, is to have people who have guns in the home commit and abide with requirements to store them separately from their ammunition and safely and securely. We are also going to help out or be a part of, if we're invited, a couple states that have good things coming up. One is the state of Maine, which, by the way, is the state in the nation relative to its whole population with the greatest number of people over 65. That is an interesting little factoid, I think, for people. Other states are West Virginia, Florida and Vermont have high over 65 populations. Maine has just successfully completed a signature gathering drive to put what's called ERPO on its fall ballot. Both Sophie Garner of our staff and Catherine Bragdon of our staff and Renee Hopkins, who is on this call, who is the CEO of the Alliance for Gun Responsibility, had a lot to do with that and teamed up with the Maine group, and they have succeeded to get this extreme risk protection order on the ballot. So we will be in state places if we're invited, if we can be helpful. We will be on the national level. We will be doing a lot of education of you all, our members, if you choose that. Perhaps you're seasoned 1960s war protesters or civil rights leaders or women's rights leaders, and you need to kind of refresh, have a continuing education class, or perhaps you're entirely new to advocacy and just would like a little bit of how do I do this? We will also be moving into an area that I think will be creative and innovative. And that is, for lack of a better term, right now, something we're calling culture change. There are in this society some truly outdated, misnamed, problematic notions about guns in America and what they are linked to and what they are associated with. What has largely been missing is what we're picking up, which is responsibility around guns. We've had a tilt toward my right, my freedom, my liberty. I can do this, I can carry it anywhere, I can stand my ground. I need it for my protection. That is one side of the story. The other side of the story that we're going to tell, along with many other partners, many groups in this thriving gun violence prevention movement, is okay, but you've got some responsibilities that go with those rights. If you're a gun owner, if you're a gun manufacturer, if you are the mayor of a small town, if you are the governor of a large state, even if you hold a major national office, theoretically, you have a responsibility to help keep our children, our teenagers, and our community safe. In culture change, we're really going to also enjoy designing, we've had great consultation from some pro bono partners, public messaging, social influencing strategies. A lot of people know I'm pretty keen on billboards. I'm imagining a billboard campaign around the United States, especially in rural areas. And some people, are a little hesitant. Well, they don't do much in this digital age. I actually think they do. I think they're got a throwback power that will appeal to people. But what I'm wanting to share is that we'd like to be in partnership with all of you, wherever you're located. We will stay in touch with you. Please stay in touch with us. We will be paying attention to every state in this country. We will be paying attention to our national work, opposing what's bad, supporting what's good, and working on developing new stories, contemporary, safe, responsible stories around guns and gun use in this country. So with that, I'm going to move us toward a conclusion. I wish we could have a conversation. There's so many wonderful people here, but thank you for listening. And I want to kind of summarize this experience of putting together this organization. I feel like Grandmothers for Gun Responsibility is trailblazing in the footsteps of thousands of grandmothers and grandfathers around the world and over time. We're new, but we're also old. And we are putting a new face on an old friend, being the grandparents of this world. One of the things I should add that reminds me when LaShonda talks about the number of grandparents, especially grandmothers, raising, we're going to work on really promoting the concept of sensitive places, which is declaring places like public libraries, playgrounds, county fairs, federal buildings, voting areas off limits to guns. Guess what? Homes are off limits in some ways, should be seen as sensitive places. maybe not off limits to guns, but where gun responsibility is the important value and the important behavior. So there we are. I wish I could take your questions or hear your comments, but that will have to wait. So shifting before we actually say goodbye, I want to move into the fundraising part of the program. And that is not particularly something I've done a lot of, but this opportunity makes it easy for me to thank those of you who have donated, sometimes incredibly generously, all of you with deep appreciation for you. But we're ready to grow, as you can see. We're ready to make a difference. We're ready to step up, and we would really welcome your financial support as well as your membership, your participation, and your messages. There will be a link here coming up in a second with a QR code showing that, grandmothers are pretty tech savvy these days, a QR code, and our website. And with that, I want to close with a meme I came across recently. Sometimes these memes actually have a little humor or clever message or something, but this one spoke to me and it said, "What can I do? I am just one person," said 7 billion people. So thank you. Thank you very much for being here today. Be in touch. We will too.